Namaste. Hello and welcome to the Kundalini podcast. That was Zen. This is Thou. I'm Vivek Govekar. This is episode 45. Today I've decided to talk about sex. Let's talk about sex, baby. Uh, so, what am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about the Kundalini spirituality, that path, and how it relates to the human sexual system, reproductive system. Uh, these two subjects are deeply interconnected. So uh, I needed to make a video on this topic. Uh, but I was kind of hesitant because this is a controversial subject and people tend to have certain opinions and very strong opinions about sex. But Kundalini is deeply connected to sex. The other thing I would like to dwell on a little bit is Osho, because he's known as the sex guru. And people have a lot of misconceptions about Osho. And I talk about Osho for a lot of good reasons. So let me get this thing out of the way and my opinions about his views on sex and what misunderstandings people may have and how I have understood it. Again, this is just my opinion. Everything I express in my videos are my opinions, but this is my understanding of it. After my awakening and how I have had to cope with certain things and what Osho says about those things. So, first, let me get this Osho subject out of the way. Osho is known as the sex guru, and he advocates free sex, whatever that is. I don't know what free sex is. There's no free sex. You always pay for it, one way or the other. Now, here is what he says, and here is what people assume he says. Because I've actually read his books on Tantra, on sexuality, his actual discussions on the subject. I think what happened was he was very advanced for that era that he was in. And in the culture, conservative culture where he discussed these things, those things were taboo. So people had uh, an opposition to that, obviously. The assumption is that Osho talks about sex as in, like, oh, let's just all have free sex. And that's somehow related to spirituality. No. My understanding, and if you listen to what he says, his specific talks deal with sex as something to be overcome. But instead of the usual approach of repression, of staying celibate and staying away from sexuality, he says enjoy it, rejoice, have fun, and get it out of your system. So even if he advocates something of a free sexual behavior, that is for a purpose. And the purpose is to overcome that craving. Okay? Let me explain it another way, in a different way. Any craving that you may have, let's take another craving, let's say food, for example. If a man is hungry and he sits down to meditate, is it likely that that person will have a good experience of meditation? No. He or she will only think about food. And food is something that, at least when you have your meal, let's say you have your 3 meals in a day, you're in a satisfied state, then that does not become an obsession for most people. So once you are satisfied and you meditate, now you're not thinking about food. Your mind is not being distracted in that direction, and you can meditate better. It's the same thing with sex or any other sensual craving. Spirituality, true spirituality, is a path for people who have fulfilled most of the other cravings in their life, other needs in their life. You have a home, you have an income, you're not hungry, and now you're looking for something higher, something deeper, finding your true self. The lower forms of spirituality, when all the other needs have not been met, are related to those needs. You're looking at God or some kind of a godly figure, some kind of a spiritual master, to help you fulfill those needs. And you're trying to see if, hey, maybe the spiritual path might get me those things, like a better job or better health, things of that nature. And that's not true spirituality. Those things are not given by God or some guru. And people that claim that are usually manipulating others to make money. Yeah. True spirituality happens, a deep quest for your true self, for a higher experience of the divine. When all your other needs are met, you have a fulfilled life. Otherwise, yes, of course, everybody has some problems or other, but those problems are not driving you towards finding something deeper within. And sex is no different. In fact, in most people's lives, if they've had very repressed experiences with sex and they have had notions which are very conservative, strict, rigid, then it's a big hindrance towards spiritual progress. And because of that, to get towards a healthy sexuality, a healthy release of your sexual energies, a healthy channeling of those energies towards good purposes, you are much better off having satisfied that need within you in a healthy way, with consensual sex with your whoever your partner is, and now you are satisfied, now you are done with that, and then you can get on the path of spirituality. So the only difference between Osho and somebody else is Osho says get it out of your system. That goes against taboos, that goes against what society is saying of how you're supposed to do things and what is moral and not moral. But the sexual urge is within us, it is a driving force, and it is related to your chakras. So by repressing it, you're creating a bigger imbalance, and you can never be on the path of spirituality and spiritual progress in a balanced way. And if there is no balance, there is no spiritual progress. So if you take it that way and understand it that way, you can actually benefit from Osho's discourses on Tantra and how to harness that energy towards a spiritual purpose. Now, as it relates to the Kundalini process, some things are very important. First of all, when the Kundalini awakens, your entire libido, your sexual uh, inclinations, they just go all over the place. They go wild. You are either extremely aroused sometimes because of the energy, or you completely lose interest in sex for long periods of time. And all of these things keep happening because the energy is moving through you. The energy is trying to correct your imbalances. So, in case of somebody with a blocked throat chakra, those may be issues related to speech, expression, either excessive, that needs to be curbed, or not good communication, something that has been repressed, that needs to be let out, that needs to be expressed. Similarly, if you've had extreme sexual repression or you've had bad experiences sexually, then that will come out. The spring that has been compressed will, rebound, and eventually that will stabilize. The other thing, physiologically, in a very real way, that happens to a male is that the seminal fluid gets sucked up the spine and now it is being used as energy for the Kundalini process. In the case of women, it is cervical fluid in the cervix. That fluid is now used towards the Kundalini process. So the sexual system, the reproductive system in human beings, has a dual purpose. Before your awakening, it is to be used for reproductive purposes, and you have a healthy sexual urge that has been given to you. After an awakening, those energies are moved in other directions and for other purposes. So, I've said this before in other videos, the need for celibacy, the need for chastity, for good moral behavior when it comes to sexuality is necessary for many reasons. Your mind, as it gets distracted, and your senses, as they take you in many directions, keeping you away from the inner stillness, from the inner communion with the divine, take the form of your sexual cravings. So those need to be harnessed and balanced in a sexual way, especially after an awakening, because now this is fuel. If you're on a desert road and you have a car and you have to travel 100 miles and there are no fuel stations on the way and you only have a limited amount of gasoline with you, then you don't want to take that and just create, like, make a fire, bonfire, and enjoy yourself. No, you need that fuel for your journey through that desert. You need to conserve that. That's one way to look at it. And then you have to conserve that using different paths. So there are spiritual ways of doing that. Those are called Tantra or Taoistic methods. There is a wonderful master of these Taoistic methods called Mantak Chia. If you can get his books or watch his YouTube videos, he talks about harnessing sexual energy towards the spiritual purpose. And Tantra does the same thing. Tantra is basically two people meditating together while they're in sexual union. That's it. Remember though, Tantric practitioners who are having sex and using it as meditation are not doing it at all in a lustful way. In fact, those cravings have already been subjugated within them. And only then, after the lust part of it has been overcome, can you use it as meditation? Can you use it for a higher purpose? So, sexuality and spirituality can coexist. There have been disciplines and schools of thought that have been put in place, and there is a whole system. But it has to be seen from a different point of view, not from lower, vulgar, sexual, like watching a video of some beautiful woman dancing with scanty clothes. That's not the approach. It's like a million miles away from that approach. Yes, it's the same sexual act, it's the same physical body. But now, the purpose is to get communion with the divine, using that as a means, just as you're sitting in meditation quietly and using your breath for meditation, or you're using some activity like running and using that to focus yourself on meditation. Someone came up with this method, this system called Tantra, to use sex as a form of meditation. And if you emphasize that, you will understand it better. You can approach it better that way. But what needs to be understood is, unless you overcome the craving, unless you satisfy that need within you, you cannot move on to the next level. Unless your repression or overuse of anything is brought to a balance, unless those things are, you're not overdoing it and you're not repressing it, it's somewhere in balance and done in a healthy way. Unless that happens, you cannot overcome it and rise to a higher level, to the next level. And sexuality is no exception. Also, like I've said, physiologically, you have to make changes in your routine, in how you go about in your day to day activities. You now have to be more careful. You don't want to get distracted and go after everything that attracts you, either in a sexual sense or in any other way. And have some balance, have some control, if you want to rise up to the next level spiritually. So that's a little bit about sex, using the reproductive system in a constructive way towards an awakening, the meaning behind Tantra and Osho. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you. Be well.